Welcome back, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective, the podcast with subject matter experts in marketing. When you take a look at your campaigns, do you absolutely know every touch point? Can you attribute the real value to every channel? Attribution is one of the most difficult yet most important aspects of marketing. Even many digital marketers today don't optimize performance well because they often fail to properly leverage data. On this episode, we'll speak with Sergio Alvarez, the CEO at AI Media Group, a performance marketing agency well known for their expertise in attribution. With his deep understanding in digital and performance marketing, we'll discuss the value of attribution and how marketers can succeed today. So let's listen to an attribution expert in Senor Tiburon on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Thank you, Sergio, very much for joining us on A Shark's Perspective today. And I wish you would tell us a little bit about your career and what got you to the point of leading the AI Media Group team to be its CEO.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. Story really starts out as being an immigrant, having my parents come here, and I saw early on what it took to really be successful, and that was just really a lot of hard work. And along the way, really what I was looking at, I started my career in Yellow Pages. So this is before the age of digital. Started out with R.H. Donnelly. Had some great fundamental training as far as being able to go out there and sell. Actually had to learn a 14-page script verbatim that you had to remember. You were able to get one try, and if you did not know it, you did not continue on to this course. So early on, you really had to know the script and understand what it was that you were selling. And then as time went on, digital started to come of age. Originally, it was Yahoo. Google really wasn't the power player. And Yellow Pages started to transform. So at a certain point in time, we started to develop what was called Super Pages. And I literally launched that project across the United States.
It's the Jurassic period of digital marketing.
This is the Jurassic period, yes. This is the BAweb.com. And
right.
when you had You've Got Mail. Yeah. But along the way, one of the things I noticed was that as I was selling Yellow Pages, people were experts, and I was not. They would say to me, what do you know about the Yellow Pages? I've been doing it for longer than you've been alive. And what became apparent was with digital, it allowed me to be the expert. And that's what Super Pages allowed us to do. But then quickly after that, around 2004, when Google really started to come of age, I started to think, how do we bring something to market that allows us to go beyond on this digital spectrum that was new, that allows us to really see and promise what digital has always said. Be accountable in this inception to sale. How do you look at those touch points? And that's how AI Media Group was formed. Literally out of my basement with a lot of the same people that are here today. And with that promise of saying, how do we
You let them out of the basement.
We let them out of the basement. Well, some of them are still in there.
Sure.
The programmers, of course. The rest are here. And as we grew the organization, it was really trying to tie everything together and looking at all sources. So it started with Google, but then we started to look, obviously, at this little thing called Facebook. And what really formed out of it is to be able to figure out what were all those touch points along the way to give that holistic view of a client, to be able to see what levers they should be pulling. So at the end of the day, they could really see what's performing for them. And that's where we came to be.
So it's perfect setup then. So let's talk about some of the changes additionally that you've seen in the landscape. Let's kind of dive in especially to paid search. A lot of people are complaining this year that CPCs are way up, so Google's making plenty of money this year.
Yes, they are.
But talk about some of the changes you've seen.
Well, it started originally where Google was giving you in particular a lot more information. And that's to get everyone used to and to use the platform, obviously. 5 years ago, it was very easy to be able to see the keyword that was converting on organic. And then that was taken away because Google was pushing everyone to do paid search. About 2.5 to 3 years ago, Google took the ability to see the keyword, the originating keyword, as the consumer wrote it, away from the system. Now, you can still dig for it, but it's difficult to be able to see in the string. And again, why did they do that? Because it makes it more difficult for people to do paid search. So really the challenges, or what has grown out of paid search in particular, is the data. Clients today are looking to be able to dive deeper and be able to actually articulate what were the pathways that people actually took. And Google is a platform, just like Facebook or anything else, but in particular the paid search. The biggest pain point for people right now are how do they articulate what actually started, how do you separate your brand versus generic. It's easy to have a 99.9 impression share on your brand, but then people go to the generic and then they say, okay, it's not necessarily converting. So again, that's just one property. Then you have Bing, you have Yahoo, and all the content sites. So even within Google proper, it's not just google.com. It's all the other properties that they service as well. And that's the biggest challenge. It goes back to this data collection that people are looking for, looking at different technologies to be able to say, how do they associate everything together? The other big thing are dashboards. So you see the big organizations like Accenture. They're making a big dent in the holding companies because, again, the holding companies were born out of traditional, and they have to do digital. But they're still treating the digital perspective like if it was traditional. It's siloed, so you have your search, your mobile, your content, your video, many times in different divisions. And at the end of the day, what do you end up with? An Excel spreadsheet. So people are looking to go deeper these days.
So talk a little bit about, without naming clients, but talk about the different types of verticals where your clients are seeing paid search this year. And changes you've helped guide them through. I mean, Bing's kind of still the red-headed stepchild of the digital world. Everybody pours their money into Google, even though Bing converts better. There's just not enough volume there. But do you take different strategies across different platforms with the different clients in different verticals?
You have to. And the whole idea behind it is you really have to use math beyond that. So it is art and science because you're speaking about copy and the keywords behind it, but that really needs to be informed by some sort of mathematical equation. If you think about Google, that's exactly what it is. And the different strategies behind it, if you think about Bing, it tends to skew to a slightly older demographic. So the idea is, who is it exactly that you're going after? And as I said before, even within Google proper and those content sites, who is it that you're trying to reach, which gets you into the audience targeting. And the big misconception with audience targeting is that there is that massive overlap. So you really can't speak about search without also looking at social, which I know we'll get into, and how it impacts each other. Because search isn't linear. It's not like you look at a product and automatically you convert. Sometimes you do. But what prompted you to do that? What were all the actions along the way? That's what everyone's looking after. That's the unicorn everyone's chasing after.
So you're going to do a lot of retirement living ads on AOL then?
We can,
since it's going to skew that way.
And to say one more thing about that, one of the things that's important that's changing when you think about the technology, it's just the reporting that's coming out of it. Google is constantly updating things, but they give you just enough, but it's Google-centric. So the idea is to be able to say, how do you go beyond that and look at things holistically? So Bing does have an impact. Was it part of the journey? But people end up converting on Google. And the other big point is how people convert on organic. So we know that at the end of the day, that journey may have started by a display mechanism, but then they convert on the site organically. So there's this constant need for people to actually segment the data, but at the end of the day, be able to say, how did it start, how did it end, and how do you figure out what levers to pull along that way?
So another big topic in the news lately, and to play off of what you were talking about with targeting, is GDPR. Talk about how that will impact marketers and advertisers today.
Well, the company line is please speak to your attorneys and your lawyers.
Exactly.
So there's obviously a greater effect in Europe. We know that. And then there's a big effect that's happening here. The first thing that we're going to see is the first client that actually gets hit with that 4%, or I believe it's that $20 million cap. And somebody will be made an example of. Mm-hmm. But companies are approaching it from different angles. We know that it's supposed to be opted in, but do you go to the website and you click on something before you continue, or is just the consent enough? It's still not figured out 100%. And you can see some major companies that are out there, from major automotive manufacturers to education. Anyone that's doing business on a global scale is struggling with this. So there is no concrete answer. And if you ask 10 different companies, they will have 10 different ways to address GDPR.
Well, and I had a conversation with somebody recently where we were talking about landing pages. On top of that, there'll be a lawsuit at some point because they had the privacy stated on the main domain, but not on a landing page that a third party did for them. So that's probably going to come up at some point where somebody gets sued because they had it on one site but not the other.
And how do you control that?
Exactly.
Because people use resellers, right?
Exactly.
So if it's on your domain and your .com, but you're paying a reseller on your behalf, whose fault is it really?
Fault, right. So let's then jump a little bit towards another form of advertising, programmatic. let's talk about how programmatic's changed and where you see it progressing in the market today.
So I'll make a bold statement. Programmatic hasn't changed. By definition, by definition, it's always been programmatic. There was somebody who was genius enough to coin that term. Programmatic is literally the fact that you're doing something in an automated fashion and you're buying against audiences. So somebody coined that term. Where it has changed is obviously the transparency, because people promise what they're doing on the programmatic side, but it's very hard to actually pinpoint unless you're receiving a list of every single site that you're on that people do not give. So you really have to take the word of the vendors that are out there, and I'm sure many of them are doing it well, but again, it's how do you prove that programmatic buy that is overlapping. So without naming any kind of programmatic vendors, take programmatic vendor A and programmatic vendor B, they're buying against a lot of the same audiences that are out there. And what's even better are VTCs. So we all know that view-through conversions, I like to call them voodoo search, you really don't know if somebody saw it. So you have an ad that's on the New York Times that's all the way on the bottom, using that as a publication, and it was actually never seen. You didn't scroll down. And then whatever that cookie window is, if somebody converts, everyone takes credit. I actually saw a client that had 8 different ads show up on the same page in different publishers, and everyone gets credit. So how do you really optimize against something like that and validate it? So just to end on the programmatic note, it's something that's incredibly important. It is machine learning. It's getting better. But the validation of it, it's still not there.
Mm-hmm. So talk then a little bit about social. We talked a little bit about targeting, and obviously Facebook has had their name in the news because of some of the targeting that Cambridge did. But talk about the value of paid social, the things that you're seeing a lot of the advertisers and marketers take advantage of, and what kind of values you see, especially with Facebook and Instagram.
Well, with Facebook in particular, the reason they're so strong is because you've given them all of your data. Exactly. Right, so it's not a lookalike model. It is you.
It is a model.
It is. It's not a model. It is you.
You're a doppelganger.
Yeah. It's exactly. And if you think about it, something like Facebook, they know more about you than you know about yourself. So those ads and the value is they're incredibly well targeted. They're placed in such a way that they're not intrusive, or at least not yet. But at the same time, are you getting the ads that are most relevant to you? Because you're always searching on there, and there are certain things that if you think about frequency capping, how many times do you want to see that same ad? And that goes back to the programmatic expectations, right? So you have to think about social with the programmatic element behind it. But again, Facebook is leading the way because of the vast amounts of data that they have. What will happen in the future, in particular when you see GDPR, is yet to be seen. However, when it comes to technology will always be ahead of adoption, and it's certainly going to be ahead of the government.
It's already affected a lot of the big data providers that were giving social companies a lot of their data. So let's talk a little bit about data and how it's used for targeting. So what values do you see in first party versus third party versus just general prospecting?
So first party data is obviously going to be your most valuable, but obviously you can only go to the well so many times. So after you exhaust that, obviously you're using third party data. Goes back to the question is how do you validate that third party data? How clean is it? And if you think about batch rates, they're incredibly low. So you have spend against match rates that at best are going to be in the teens. So is that really the most efficient use when you're thinking about third parties? So you really have to do a combination of all of them. The clients that have a login, they're always going to do best because now you can actually know who your actual customer is, and now you can start to segment them. The people that actually have bought, and if they're upsell opportunities versus the ones that have never gone on there, those are the ones that are able to leverage the data best. But it goes back to that first-party data being leveraged as best as possible. Again, if you're able to see what were the pathways that user took, leveraging that first-party data and or third-party data.
Okay, so talk about some of the clients that you have, and so at least some of the generalities, the verticals, and best practices on how they are leveraging data.
So some of the verticals that I see that really are ahead when it comes to data are the people in the education space, people in the telecommunication space, people automotive. These are longer tail purchases. It's not something that you necessarily do immediately. It's a big cost. If you think about education in particular, there's this challenge today where people are questioning whether they should even go to college. So it's even that much more important that the education industry in particular really mine their data. And what we're seeing, because we do a lot of education clients, is the fact that they're looking at not just the initial costs, but what is the total enrollment. They want to see when somebody started and then following that student through all the way down to enrollment. The only way you can do that is if you look at that data from the onset. Now, obviously, could be a 4-year period, but think about the wealth of data that a potential student that actually becomes an enrolled student down to enrollment actually does along the way. And are there triggers during that time frame that would signal that maybe they will not continue or they're going to go to another school? You can pick that all up through the internet and anything that's on digital. So there are certain verticals that are just getting smarter about leveraging that data and being able to see where is that point where the people are going to drop off. If you think about the telecommunications industry, which we've also done a lot of work in, so in particular the cable companies, this is another long purchase. You have to speak to your loved ones about it. It's a bill you're going to be receiving every month. And at the end of the day, you have only so many providers that you can pick from. But this is a service that requires a phone call because you can't do everything on the web, even though they like you to. Mm-hmm. If you do fill out something that's on the web, you can have buyer's remorse. They have not installed yet. So the clients that have that longer sales cycle, those are the ones that are really benefiting from all the data that's out there because they need to. They need to be able to follow that user along and to be able to see, now that we've got them in, they have not converted yet, how do we make sure that they complete that conversion? And I'm speaking about a sale. And once that sale is made, how do you make sure that you stem the tide to make sure that they don't cancel? Well, you do that by leveraging all those different data points between social, video, mobile, content, because we all are leaving that digital footprint. And the people that are leading the way are the people that are mining that data.
Let's talk a little bit about landing pages and how you optimize in a campaign and sort of that full customer journey. What is your general standpoint on whether or not you should point traffic to the main domain, you should point them to a microsite, a simple landing page? What kind of best practices do you recommend and see in the market today?
So landing pages were created out of a necessity because a lot of companies do not have the bandwidth to be able to constantly change their .com. Especially the larger organization. It also has a lot to do, if you think about the retail industry, with specials, offers that are coming out there, time-sensitive information, so it makes sense. But landing pages were also created to keep people in that microcosm. That way they can have all the tracking, right? You could control a microsite or a landing page where you can see the phone number and have a different number on there that's going over to a call center. And you can control the offer and make sure that it's made to convert. And what many people do is they close off that landing page and they do not allow the user to go back to the .com. And the reason they do that is because it's very difficult to track that cross-domain, even though that can be done. So there are substantial benefits to having the landing page, but our belief is that you also need to give the user the ability to go over to the .com. So a good example, I spoke before about education. Education sites have thousands of pages because of all the different sources that you can go on there, the specialties that they have. So they're not made to convert. So a landing page is built. But as a prospective student, and you're making this big decision, you just don't want to fill out a form. And even worse, you just might be filling out a form, which means you're not really qualified. If you're able to do a combination of both, where you have a properly designed landing page and you're constantly A/B testing, now not ABCD, but A/B testing and declaring a winner, and you give the people that are going on there the ability to also go to the .com, now you have a full view. So a long way of saying that I believe you should be testing both, and you should give the ability for the user that once even they convert, for them to be able to go to the .com so they can have more information, which gives you or the client more information about who that potential person is. What is it that they did after they filled out a form in a landing page or went there? What are their interests within the site? How deep are they going? Now that starts speaking about retargeting and remarketing initiatives. It also signals to be able to see, did they have that buyer's remorse, let's say? Are they looking in the education side about the actual campus? Okay, well, that's going to trigger ads to give them about campus life. So again, it's leveraging the data and not just locking it to a landing page, but giving them the ability to go deeper than that.
So let's talk a little bit about having a proprietary tool that you use for your own proprietary bidding system. There are a lot of well-known tools out in the market for marketers today, but that a lot of agencies value. But talk about machine learning and building your own tool, and where's the value in doing that as opposed to just getting one off the the technology shelf, if you will.
So if we start off with the ones that are off-the-shelf technology, the challenge behind them is the fact that it's boxed in. And if you think about Google and the APIs and all the networks, Facebook, to keep up with that constant innovation, you cannot do that with something that's fully automated. So a lot of the off-the-shelf technologies are several months behind what you can do in AdWords specifically. If you think about proprietary, which is an overused word because everyone says they have proprietary technology, but the idea is it proprietary technology that is holistic? Because you cannot have a bidding system unless it's connected to an attribution system that is connected to a reporting system. It all has to flow together. And what I find many times as clients, and as literally today, I was speaking to a very large technology company in the electronic space, and they're using 17 different vendors. One for attribution, one for their bidding, their optimization, their visualization. I can go on and on. And I asked at the end of the day, you've got some great companies and well-known names that you're working with, from Adobe to Accenture to Merkle. But at the end of the day, I said, so what do you end up with? And they said, an Excel spreadsheet. So any kind of proprietary tool is only as good as the components that are in there. And if it does not contain all the different components, you're back to an Excel spreadsheet.
So then let's jump to attribution and talk about really, we're going to talk about the omni-channel campaigns. There are a lot of clients, a lot of advertisers who silo things and keep email separate from digital, separate from direct mail, separate from social. Talk about the value of an omni-channel campaign, pulling all those data points together, and then how you pull that in and attribute it and measure it.
So that's near and dear to my heart. If you think about attribution, it's the idea of this inception to sale. So where many marketers fail is they look at last click. And there's a value to that. The value is that you see the last in, and you can optimize that immediately. But what you're missing is that generic or that long-tail keyword. The fact that you're giving the wrong attribution to that display ad. People think that display in and of itself is just giving you brand lift or a top-of-the-funnel tactic, and it is. But by design, everything that you do on digital, even if it's branding, is made to lead to an acquisition. So the idea is that if you have a proper attribution system, and it has to be a real-time system, getting something that's 30 days old does not help you in a live ecosystem of search. And I'm not just speaking about paid search. So the idea with attribution is, how are you able to break down those walls? Because if you think about Google and Yahoo, just those two huge properties, they cannot see between each other. A proper attribution system allows you to see that somebody may have started their query on Google, then they were served something on Facebook because of the targeting, they consumed display ads, they went on content, and then they converted on organic. That's the power of attribution, to be able to say that organic sale that is that last click, that's not where it started from. It took all these efforts in order to actually get that particular customer. And to compound that even further, what if it was a phone call that ended up a month later on an organic site, but meanwhile the user consumed several display ad, content ads, went on their site organically and paid along the way? Those are thrown to the side. And this is where many marketers make a mistake. They look at the very example of saying, take top generic keywords, and they're very costly. So let's use the telecom example. The word high-speed internet can be a $40 keyword. Meanwhile, a cable brand, cable X, whatever it may be, could be $2. So obviously you'll have a 99.9 impression share on your brand. And when you look at the generics, you're going to say, well, that $30 keyword of high-speed internet or more did not convert. What you're not realizing is that's what actually started the journey, along with all the different tactics. So we mentioned email and direct mail. So sticking on the digital side, the biggest challenge with email is that you see an open rate. But many times you're not ready to convert at that moment, but it was one of the prompts or one of the touch points along the way. So if you're able to, and you can with today's technology, to be able to say, email was also in that path to purchase or consideration. Now you can start to look at the percentages and say, okay, how many times did that email impact that ultimate sale? whether it was organic, whether it was paid. And if you think about Facebook, it does such a heavy lift, and it really doesn't get the proper credit because Facebook is not made to convert at that moment. But you're engaged. It's highly targeted because they know who you are and what you like. But meanwhile, when you go to convert, you go on Google. So you can argue that it was Facebook that actually led to that conversion. That's what an attribution system allows you to do. It has to be real time. It has to go cross-channel. And then if we wanted to get into cross-device, that's yet another thing.
Let's talk then a little bit about types of devices and how that sort of morphed over the last few years. Obviously, we've gone from print to desktop to laptop to device now to phones. Talk about that evolution of channels and where you've seen campaigns sort of evolve with it.
Well, started off with this. In the olden days, 10, 15 years ago, if you think about traditional media, let's just take three very simple ones. You had TV, radio, and print. And then the smarter marketers would say, let me put a phone number on my print ad. And let's say that was newspaper. And somebody calls and they attribute that sale to the print ad. They were not able to know that the person consumed radio and then they actually consumed TV. So what if you were able to literally know that the person saw that TV spot, heard that radio spot, and then they converted on the actual phone number from that print ad? Well, now you wouldn't give all that attribution over to that print ad. You'd be able to figure out what levers to pull, when to do more TV in market, what's actually resonating with that. Oh, and by the way, that the creative now gets informed by the mathematics. So if you apply that to digital, which is what it's for, we have these IP-based TVs that are out there. We are getting to the point now that you can actually have that device in the home that's an IP-based TV that's connected to the same IPs that you have on your laptop, on your desktop, and all the other mobile devices, mobile in particular. So now you can start to get a more granular picture of all the different devices, because as they say, we live in a multi-screen universe. So the idea is to go beyond cookies, which is really an antiquated technologies, and there's inherent issues behind that, and start leveraging device IDs. Be able to assign an actual ID to a user and still maintaining compliance, but now to be able to stitch together that journey of a user going from a mobile device and doing some research on, going on to their desktop and really going and getting more information, and it could be, again, a different property, and then ultimately they make that phone call from that same mobile device. Again, if you're not connecting all those dots, all you see is a call from a mobile device. Meanwhile, it could have been that TV commercial from an IP-based TV, and I'm not speaking about over the top, that actually was that first touch point.
So you've got a lot of marketers today who either sit in departments or different chairs across the hall. They've got different budgets, different bosses, different siloed attempts at doing a marketing campaign that holistically is for one brand where they work. So if I'm trying to pull together and look at best practices for pulling together a true campaign that is going to run across a lot of different channels, kind of walk us through what you see as a best practice way to set that up, whether it's leveraging data, leveraging other channels, just your ideas of best practices.
So that goes back to the omni-channel, but it's the unification of data. And you made a good point there where we see people that are completely disconnected. They're trying to achieve the same goal. So you're trying to sell whatever project, service, or widget that you have.
Because the consumer only knows of it as brand X's widget.
Correct.
They don't know what department or who it is, or they don't care what channel it's on. It's brand X's widget.
And the idea is that, with that being said, every department, so take a social department versus a search versus display, just those three simple departments, they all want to take credit. And it goes back to this last click in wins. And search usually is the one that's going to win. So the best way of designing it is, as I said, first of all, a unification of data, which whatever system you're using for, which goes back to that attribution. But you also have to look at the offline data. So media mix modeling is something that's been done for years, but more so today. All those offline touch points can be converted to digital. Because you cannot look at any advertising campaign without looking at the total media mix and the impact that it has. Even weather. So there are certain clients that weather it's something that's very sensitive to them for. So you can plug in weather forecasting. And I'm not just speaking about what's happening that day, but what's going on 5 days out. You have time in there. So if you have campaigns that are active at 9 o'clock in New York, it's only 6 a.m. in California, let alone a global campaign. So the point is, you have to unify all the data in one centralized system. It all has to speak to each other. And in order to do the bids correctly, you have to have one impact the other and be able to look at this journey along the way to be able to say, what levers do I pull to get that end result?
So why do you think then that there are so many constant failures? Why are people so resistant? Is it a complete lack of knowledge? Is it apathy? Is it what is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, what it is
how's that for setting up on the tee?
One of the big challenges is a lot of people are protecting their fiefdoms. So if you think about these large organizations that are out there, you have a team of X people doing social, search, display. Each of them have to prove their worth. At the end of the day, they should all be working in concert. They have to be working together. So the first thing is a re-education from the top to be able to say, we are trying to sell this end product. And it's not that if social is not the last converter, it's not valued as much. It's the fact to be able to understand the impact of each of those channels. And that's really the hardest part. The reason why people don't look at it that way, one is education. Two, I'm going to have to blame a lot of the traditional agencies. It's based on FTEs. It's based on third-party systems managed by a third-party vendor. So that allows for a lot of complication. I make the joke many times that when a large holding company has a successful quarter on behalf of a client, it was because they did a good job. But if they do not, it's because of the content, the creative, the social, the website. There's always an out, because the data is in different areas. And they can always just say, well, we'll buy a new bidding system, or we'll try this new attribution system. But if you have everything connected together, then it really paints the right story as to where you should go. It's that the whole idea is that if you have everything in one place, it allows you to get a full view. You're still going to be able to segment things and go deeper, but at the end of the day, you want to be able to say, how did I end up getting that sale, that phone call? What was the pathways that got us there?
Couldn't agree more. So walk me through, as a marketer, how are we using artificial intelligence correctly today? It's the big buzzword. It's one that everybody's trying to do to leverage data. But what are you seeing as a real practice and a real expectation that I can expect to enable for marketing campaigns?
Well, artificial intelligence, in particular machine learning, that is the underpinning if you speak about all the different technologies that are out there. And obviously we know, going back to Google, they're the leaders in that space, as is Facebook. And you can see what's happening just in the cars that are out there with self-driving vehicles. These are all systems that are just becoming smarter because technology continues to evolve. And the more data that you have in, the more it can be crunched by this artificial intelligence. Computers are reaching at such a point that the more data that you are able to get in, the better the predictions. So it's the models are becoming more correct because the more data you have, the bigger data set, the better the prediction and the better the outcome, which goes back to what I'm saying, that the best way of leveraging it is to have as many data points as possible, which leads back to this holistic view. If you're able to have all the different mechanisms, your social, your video, your mobile, your content, even your offline, and you're able to get all that into one singular platform, that's where the machine learning is able to take over. And that's what's going to give you an edge against the competitors, because now you're actually seeing what people do and anticipate it before they actually even do it based on their prior results. And that's really what AI is all about.
Yeah, predictive analytics.
Yep.
Sergio, thank you again for being on A Shark's Perspective. Tell people where they can find out more about your company.
Well, thank you very much for having us. If you'd like to find more information about AI Media Group and our attribution solutions, you can find this at www.aimediagroup.com.
Thank you. So there was my conversation with Sergio Alvarez, the CEO of AI Media Group, and our look at attribution and marketing today. Let's take a look at 3 key insights from that conversation. First, there's an art to the science, but remember, there's also a science to the art. And with your cross-channel strategies, you've got to use mathematical equations to help you make decisions based upon the data that you can now attribute via different touch points on a campaign. Second, leveraging data could not be more important of a factor, especially when performing omni-channel campaigns. Leveraging all those different data points between social and video and mobile and content and others is uber important since we are all leaving that digital footprint. The marketers who are leading the way are the ones who are truly mining that data. Third, true attribution is one of the most important aspects in performance marketing. Not realizing the long tail of ads or keywords, or direct mail, or TV, or Facebook, or email can make or break your campaign. Even more, it helps you most realize where your customer began the journey and not just where their last click was. Unfortunately, too many brands are siloed across channels and platforms and live in environments where they don't realize how the touch points work together because they cannot see true attribution of a campaign. Got a question? Then feel free to find me on LinkedIn or send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. And thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this show regarding another one of the many components that makes up marketing today. And join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.